My sister broke into my house and left wine-soaked baby clothes after giving my infant alcohol. When I asked why she won't stop stalking us, she said, "He's still breathing, isn't he?" I called the police. But what she didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything as a cybersecurity analyst, and her digital footprint was about to destroy her entire life. Let me back up to explain how we got here, because the level of systematic harassment my sister Megan put us through would sound unbelievable if I hadn't captured every single piece of evidence. As someone who specializes in digital forensics for corporate security breaches, I have a particular skill set that proved invaluable when dealing with a stalker, even when that stalker was my own sister. Megan and I had always had a distant relationship, but everything changed when she turned 21 and discovered alcohol. What started as social drinking quickly escalated to daily consumption, and worse, she became obsessed with dragging me into her destructive habits. I'd made it clear from the beginning that I don't drink, a boundary she seemed determined to violate at every opportunity. The breaking point came during her anniversary celebration with her boyfriend Thomas. Despite promising to respect my sobriety, she spent the entire evening secretly adding alcohol to my drinks, vodka in my water, whiskey in my soda, rum in what I thought was just Coke. By the third tampered drink, I was experiencing my first and only time being intoxicated, clinging to her and asking what was wrong with me while she recorded my distress and laughed. That night, I cut her off completely. I sent a voice message telling her I never wanted to see her again, and I meant it. She called a week later, not to apologize, but to blame me for ruining her party because people judged her after witnessing what she'd done. I hung up and blocked her number. Life moved forward beautifully without her chaos. I met David, a software engineer who understood my methodical approach to life and shared my values. We got engaged, married, and when I became pregnant with Jackson, I felt like my life was exactly where it should be. Megan wasn't invited to the wedding and made no attempt to reach out. But when I posted about my pregnancy on Facebook, suddenly she was messaging me through mutual friends' accounts. She'd seen the post and claimed it made her realize nothing is more important than family. The manipulation was obvious, but I was hormonal and optimistic about becoming a mother. Against David's advice, I agreed to meet her for coffee. At that coffee meeting, Megan appeared contrite and apologetic, but she also consumed 3 glasses of wine during our 2-hour conversation. When I expressed concern about her drinking, she was adamant that alcohol was a part of her life she'd never give up, but promised she'd never again try to involve me in her drinking. She seemed sincere about wanting to be an aunt to my baby. For nearly a year, she kept that promise. She attended family gatherings, stayed appropriately sober around me, and seemed to genuinely be trying to rebuild our relationship. I started to believe people could change, that becoming an aunt might give her the motivation she needed to get her life together. I should have trusted my instincts. Last month, Megan asked to visit our home for the first time since Jackson's birth. He was 6 months old, healthy and perfect, and I was finally feeling confident as a mother. I laid down one absolute rule. She could not go near Jackson if she'd been drinking. She agreed enthusiastically, saying she completely understood my concern. She arrived with 2 bottles of wine, explaining she'd brought them for David and me to enjoy. David had a single glass with dinner while I stuck to water, but Megan consumed nearly both entire bottles herself over the course of the evening. By 9 p.m., she was visibly intoxicated, slurring her words and becoming increasingly loud and erratic. When she asked to use the bathroom, I pointed her upstairs. After 15 minutes, I went to check on her, worried she might be getting sick. The bathroom was empty. I found her in our bedroom, sitting on our bed, completely wasted and holding my sleeping baby. The moment she saw me, panic flashed across her face. She tried to stand quickly to hand Jackson to me, but the alcohol had destroyed her coordination. She lost her balance, fell, and dropped my 6-month-old son onto our hardwood floor. Jackson's screams filled the house as I scooped him up, checking frantically for injuries. Thankfully, he seemed more scared than hurt, but I was shaking with rage and terror. I called for David, who came running at the sound of Jackson's cries. While David comforted our son, I dragged Megan downstairs and outside. "You had one rule," I told her. "One single rule. You were not to go near my baby while drunk. And you not only violated that boundary, you dropped him." She kept apologizing, making excuses about being dizzy, about not meaning any harm. I called her a taxi and told her she was permanently cut out of our lives. As her ride arrived, she was still making excuses, still minimizing what had happened. But after she left, David discovered something that made my blood run cold. Jackson wasn't just crying from the fall. He was vomiting, and there was alcohol on his breath. In her drunken state, Megan had given wine to my infant son. The next few hours were the most terrifying of my life. The ambulance, the emergency room, the doctors confirming alcohol poisoning in my 6-month-old baby, the social workers questioning us like we were criminals, the tests, the monitoring, the very real possibility that my son might suffer permanent damage because of my sister's reckless behavior. During this nightmare, I tried calling Megan repeatedly. Every call went to voicemail. Every text went unread. She had vanished, leaving us to deal with the consequences of her actions while she disappeared to avoid responsibility. Jackson survived. The doctors assured us there appeared to be no permanent damage, but they warned that even small amounts of alcohol can cause developmental issues that might not show up immediately. We'd need ongoing monitoring and follow-up appointments. When we finally brought our son home from the hospital, I was done giving Megan chances. David and I immediately blocked her on all platforms, installed security cameras, and began documenting everything that had happened. As a cybersecurity analyst, I knew the importance of creating an evidentiary trail, especially when dealing with someone whose judgment was clearly compromised. For about a week, we had peace. Jackson was recovering well, and I thought maybe Megan had finally understood the severity of what she'd done. Then my phone started exploding with messages from relatives. Megan had posted a tearful, clearly intoxicated video on Facebook, painting herself as a loving aunt who'd made one tiny mistake and was now being cruelly punished by her unreasonable sister. According to her version of events, Jackson had accidentally sipped from her glass, and I was using this minor incident as an excuse to continue our long-standing feud. The video had prompted dozens of family members to contact me, demanding explanations and accusing me of being vindictive. Some suggested I was overreacting to punish Megan for past grievances. The manipulation was masterful, designed to make her look like the victim while painting me as the villain. But here's where my professional background became crucial. As someone who investigates digital security breaches and online fraud for a living, I recognize this campaign for what it was: a systematic attempt to control the narrative through misinformation and emotional manipulation. I started by creating a secure documentation system. Every message, every social media post, every attempt at contact was captured, time-stamped, and stored. I took screenshots of her Facebook video before she could delete it. I saved every message from relatives who'd been contacted by Megan to gather information about us. My investigation revealed the scope of her campaign. She'd contacted over 20 family members with different versions of events, each tailored to what she thought that person would find most convincing. To some, I was an overprotective mother. To others, I was continuing a childhood rivalry. To a few, she claimed Jackson had never been in any real danger. The fake rehab letter was particularly telling. When she sent formal documentation claiming she'd enrolled in treatment and needed family healing as part of her recovery, I did what I always do when investigating suspicious documents. I verified the source. The facility she named didn't exist. The letterhead was created using a basic template, and the therapist's license number belonged to a completely different person in another state. I compiled everything into a comprehensive digital forensics report, the same type I'd create for corporate clients dealing with insider threats. 23 pages of documented harassment, false statements, and systematic manipulation, complete with metadata analysis and timeline reconstruction. But Megan wasn't done. She escalated to physical surveillance. Our new security cameras captured her first visit, clearly intoxicated, carrying flowers and a teddy bear. She rang our doorbell repeatedly, then sat on our porch for 20 minutes before leaving her gifts with a note claiming she was sorry for the misunderstanding and begging to see her nephew. The flowers reeked of cigarette smoke and alcohol, as if she'd bought them at a gas station on her way over from a bar. The note was barely legible, written in the shaky handwriting of someone who'd been drinking heavily. I added this incident to my documentation file and threw her gifts in the trash. But this was just the beginning of an escalating pattern of stalking behavior that would ultimately provide me with enough evidence to destroy her life completely. The next morning, I contacted our pediatrician's office to warn them that Megan might attempt to access Jackson's medical records. Dr. Peterson's staff was professional and understanding, adding security flags to Jackson's file that would require additional verification for any information requests. My precaution proved necessary. That afternoon, the office called to inform me that someone claiming to be my sister had indeed tried to obtain Jackson's records, claiming she was helping gather documentation for a specialist consultation. When asked for the authorization form I'd supposedly signed, she hung up. This attempt to access protected medical information was a federal crime, and I documented it accordingly. I also reached out to my network of cybersecurity professionals to assess what other digital boundaries she might violate. The next escalation came when we visited daycare facilities. Little Explorers Academy seemed perfect for Jackson when I eventually returned to work, but during our tour, the manager mentioned something chilling. A woman matching Megan's description had visited the day before, claiming she was researching enrollment options for her nephew. I showed the manager Megan's photo, and she confirmed it was the same person. We immediately decided against that facility and began researching in-home nanny options instead. The idea that Megan was tracking our future plans and inserting herself into Jackson's life was terrifying. Around this time, my parents attempted another manipulation. They called David's phone, knowing I wouldn't answer their calls directly, and invited us for Sunday dinner. They promised Megan wouldn't be there, swearing they just wanted to see their grandson and talk through everything calmly. Despite my misgivings, David and I decided to give them one chance. We arrived at their house Sunday afternoon, and for the first hour, everything seemed normal. Mom cooed over Jackson while Dad chatted with David about work. I was actually starting to relax when I heard it, Megan's unmistakable laugh coming from the kitchen. Before Mom could make excuses, Megan walked into the living room holding a glass of wine, smiling that manipulative smile I knew so well. "Surprise?" she said. "I thought we could finally talk things out." I didn't say a word. I picked up Jackson, grabbed his diaper bag, and walked straight to the car. David followed, telling my parents exactly what he thought of their betrayal as I strapped Jackson into his car seat with shaking hands. When David returned from confronting my parents, he delivered news that made everything worse. Megan had been living with them for 3 weeks. Thomas had kicked her out after learning what she'd done to Jackson, and my parents had taken her in without telling us. The depth of their betrayal was staggering. They'd lied to our faces while harboring someone who had poisoned their own grandson. I sent them a simple text. "We need space from all of you right now. Please respect that." Then I blocked their numbers. But my parents' betrayal had an unexpected benefit. It provided information about Megan's living situation and state of mind. Through my cybersecurity contacts, I was able to piece together a comprehensive picture of her current circumstances. Thomas confirmed that Megan's drinking had escalated dramatically since the incident with Jackson. She'd lost her job at a local retail store for showing up intoxicated. Her obsession with getting access to Jackson had become all-consuming, and she'd been researching ways to claim grandparent rights for aunts, despite having no legal standing whatsoever. The grocery store incident confirmed that her escalation was becoming dangerous. While shopping with Jackson, I noticed her at the end of an aisle pretending to examine produce while clearly tracking our movements. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away, but the encounter triggered my first panic attack. This wasn't coincidental. Our local grocery store was 15 miles from my parents' house where she was staying. She had to have followed me there, which meant she was conducting active surveillance of our daily routines. I contacted Jordan, a detective friend who specialized in stalking cases. His initial assessment was sobering. Following you to a grocery store is concerning, but courts typically need evidence of direct threats or a clear pattern of escalating behavior before they'll grant restraining orders. But Jordan's advice was invaluable. Document everything with timestamps and locations, set up more cameras, and most importantly, don't respond to any contact attempts. That can be used against you to argue the contact was welcome. Over the next 2 weeks, Megan's digital harassment campaign intensified. She created new email addresses to bypass our blocks, sending daily messages about her recovery journey and begging for just 5 minutes with Jackson. Each message started sympathetically, but inevitably included guilt trips and manipulative language. "Don't you want Jackson to know his aunt who loves him?" one message read. "I remember how much you loved Aunt Patricia when we were kids. Are you really going to deprive him of that kind of relationship?" I saved every message without responding, watching as her tone gradually shifted from pleading to demanding. "I understand you're upset," became, "You're being unreasonable and you can't keep him from me forever." The breakthrough in building our case came through a mutual friend named Dakota. She called me with disturbing information about questions Megan had been asking. What time I usually put Jackson down for naps, whether I still kept a spare key under a planter like our parents used to, and other details about our daily routines. When Dakota refused to provide this information, Megan claimed she wanted to leave a special surprise for Jackson. The implication was clear. She was planning to break into our house. I immediately had all our locks changed and updated our security system, but the psychological impact was devastating. The idea that my own sister was casing our home like a common burglar was almost impossible to process. The 2 a.m. surveillance incident provided the evidence we needed for legal action. David spotted Megan's car parked across the street where she'd been watching our house for over an hour. When David approached the vehicle, she claimed she was making sure we were safe, but fled when he threatened to call police. With this evidence of escalating stalking behavior, we were able to obtain a temporary restraining order. The judge granted it immediately, prohibiting Megan from coming within 500 feet of us, our home, or Jackson's medical providers. But Megan's response to the restraining order revealed just how far her obsession had progressed. Within hours of being served, she violated it by sending an email from a new address. "No piece of paper will keep me from what's mine. Blood doesn't wash away with a judge's signature." This direct threat gave police grounds for arrest, but when officers went to serve the violation warrant, they discovered Megan had abandoned her apartment. What they found there was deeply disturbing. Dozens of empty liquor bottles and an entire wall covered with printed photos of Jackson, some clearly taken from our social media, others apparently photographed through windows or from a distance. There were also handwritten notes tracking our routines, Jackson's nap times when David left for work, which grocery stores I frequented. She'd been conducting comprehensive surveillance of our family for weeks. An arrest warrant was issued, but not knowing Megan's location made us more fearful, not less. She could be anywhere, planning anything, and we had no way to predict when or where she might appear next. We decided to stay with David's parents in their gated community while police searched for Megan. For 3 days, we felt almost safe, believing distance and security might finally give us breathing room. Then I received a text from an unknown number. "Nice place. The garden looks peaceful." She'd found us again. David's father, a retired security specialist, immediately implemented professional-grade safety protocols. No established routines, varied schedules, different routes for any errands, and absolutely no social media updates of any kind. but Megan's resources for tracking us seemed limitless. She somehow obtained David's parents' phone numbers and began calling them with elaborate stories about me keeping her from her only nephew. When that failed, she started contacting David's extended family, forcing us into awkward conversations with people who barely knew us, explaining why a complete stranger was calling them about our baby. The court hearing for our permanent restraining order became a battle of narratives. We presented our comprehensive documentation, hospital records proving Jackson's alcohol poisoning, police reports about the surveillance, photographs of the wine-soaked baby clothes she'd left in Jackson's nursery during her break-in, records of the fake social media accounts using his photos, and testimony from witnesses like Dakota and Thomas. Megan's high-profile attorney painted her as a struggling alcoholic who'd made one terrible mistake and was being unfairly punished while trying to recover. He claimed I had a history of exaggerating situations due to childhood jealousy, and that I was using this incident to permanently sever family connections she needed for her recovery. My client has enrolled in rehabilitation, he argued smoothly. She acknowledges her error in judgment but is actively seeking help. Permanently severing family ties through this order would be detrimental to her recovery. But our documentation was overwhelming. The judge reviewed the hospital records, the surveillance footage, the threatening emails, and the evidence of systematic stalking behavior. When he granted the permanent restraining order for 3 years, maintaining the 1,000-foot distance requirement, I felt the first genuine relief in months. That relief was short-lived. Within hours, Megan violated the order again with another threatening message. Blood doesn't smudge away with a judge's signature. This time, when police went to arrest her for the violation, they discovered she'd been living in her car. The investigation of her abandoned apartment revealed the full extent of her obsession, maps marking our routines, printed social media photos arranged in shrine-like displays, and notebooks filled with plans for rescuing Jackson from our harmful environment. She was arrested at the gated community's entrance, attempting to scale the fence around David's parents' backyard. The security footage clearly showed her face and provided undeniable evidence of violation. During her bail hearing, additional terms were imposed: ankle monitoring, weekly substance abuse testing, and mandatory mental health evaluation. The psychological assessment revealed personality disorder traits that explained her fixation on Jackson, and the court ordered dual treatment for both alcohol addiction and mental health issues. For the first time since this nightmare began, we had breathing room. Megan was in custody, monitored, and required to undergo comprehensive treatment. The immediate threat was contained, though we knew our lives had been fundamentally changed by her actions. 6 months later, reports from her treatment facility indicated genuine progress. She was maintaining sobriety, attending therapy sessions, and hadn't violated any monitoring conditions. Through her therapist, she sent a letter acknowledging her actions without excuses and expressing genuine remorse for endangering Jackson. But trust, once shattered, is nearly impossible to rebuild. When her therapist proposed supervised family sessions after 14 months of documented progress, we agreed only to video calls with both therapists present. The woman who appeared on screen looked genuinely transformed. Clearer complexion, focused eyes, none of the bloated appearance that comes with heavy drinking. Over several months of supervised contact, Megan demonstrated consistent respect for boundaries. She accepted that access to Jackson wasn't negotiable and focused on making amends to David and me specifically. When she brought a gift to our first in-person meeting and I reminded her we'd discussed no gifts, she immediately apologized and set it aside without argument. Old habits, I should have respected that boundary. That acknowledgement of the boundary itself, rather than defensiveness or manipulation, was more convincing than any apology could have been. Today, nearly 4 years later, we have a cautiously managed relationship with Megan. She attends occasional family gatherings where Jackson is present but under strict conditions: complete sobriety and never alone with him. She's moved to a neighboring town for work in addiction counseling, using her experience to help others. Jackson knows a simplified version of our history. Aunt Megan was very sick when he was a baby and made bad choices that meant she couldn't see him for a long time. He accepts this with the straightforward logic of children, neither particularly attached to her nor afraid of her. As for me, I've learned that protecting your child sometimes means defending them from people who should love them most. My cybersecurity background proved invaluable in documenting harassment and building legal cases, but the emotional toll of being stalked by family was something no professional training could have prepared me for. The most important lesson: trust your instincts as a parent. I knew Megan had problems but allowed family pressure to override my better judgment. Never again. Jackson's safety will always come first, regardless of who might be offended by the boundaries we maintain. For anyone facing similar situations with family members who endanger children, you don't owe anyone access to your child. A relationship with your child is a privilege, not a right. Those who violate your trust with something as precious as your child's safety forfeit that privilege, potentially forever. Sometimes the best resolution isn't reconciliation, but clear understanding of necessary boundaries. Sometimes protection looks like simply keeping your child safe, day after day, from whatever threatens them, even when those threats come from people who claim to love them.